afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast State of the Balance, this time for August 2016. Still no real patch there, except for that little bit there in, well, late, I think, July for the mortar there, slightly reining it further in, but overall nothing there, and probably nothing at least for August, possibly even September, due to the war paint tournament, meaning that's probably going to be some time before anything really seriously changes, except the metagame, which of course we see some shifts here, sort of different factions try to react to each other better. But overall, I don't think we should be expecting anything huge there, sadly. As for the current state, it's rather sort of favoured in the Allies, as has been for the last few months. Less so now that more has been brought into line, but still rather favoured in some direction. Of course, the responses from the Axis are sort of a bit varied there. As for the Americans, obviously they're rather sort of the one in the lead there in terms of overall strength. With the mortar, the overall early game is pretty strong, and most American players will now go for 2 to 3 riflemen and then a mortar straight into the captain, follow up with a Stewart, a few anti-tank guns, and depending on how they're feeling, they might just try and rely on heavy cavalry, in which case they'll probably use it Pauling, just relying for the Pershing, in which case you might stand a chance if you can get rid of the Stewart and then sort of push back against them, or they'll actually go for medium armor and tank stores, in which case you'll actually be in bigger trouble. Other doctrines also use it as tactical support and to an extent armor as well if things don't quite go their way. Recon support, mechanized, airborne, a bit of rifle coming to us, but otherwise most of the others have pretty much sort of fallen to the wayside. Some of because, heavy cavalry again might as well just be called the Pershing Company, considering how many go for it. It's the Calliope Company as they go for tactical support most of the time here. And that does indicate, overall there are some things that need to change. Only part of the thing is because, well, overall, the rifle are just too good. Most cases, if they go for heavy cavalry, they won't even bother with the range, despite the range being really good. The problem is, riflemen are just almost as good for a lower price, which rather means there's not really much of an incentive to bother with more elite infantry half the time as Americans. And overall, the riflemen just, needs to give way. Particularly now they got a mortar which performs exactly like the Wehrmacht mortar, except it actually gets better with the Veterans in 1. So there's definitely some problems there which do need to be looked into, and also the Stewart needs to be looked into. The captain and overall the company command post is currently what you call a no-brainer choice, which means overall they need to nerf the Stewart, lower its damage versus infantry, and possibly also consider looking into its health or something like that. Perhaps lower it a bit more, or I don't know, something else, maybe make stun rounds less effective, for example, or just maybe even remove it entirely, just leaving only the ability to damage engine velocity and the rest of its performance there. It'd still be a pretty powerful vehicle, just less really good, and still supported by the captain and the anti-tank gun. It might also then make, the lieutenant a bit more interesting, since then they have more the actual anti-infantry, which are then required to support with bazookas, rather than just, again, making the Stewart the no-brainer choice. They can overall just lock down the Axis unless they somehow get lucky and actually knock it out, because in the hands of a good player, the Stewart is an absolute menace to actually have to deal with. And again, with the riflemen, Veterans free received accuracy bonus there needs to be changed into, I think, to a cheaper reinforcement bonus, rather than just making what they currently are, which is basically get a light curve bonus out in the open, which only sort of induces blobbing, and that needs to go away very far away. So change that to reinforcement bonus, which might also ensure they don't suffer so much manpower bleed that way, but it will fit them a bit better there, and allow sort of use of other units without being, punished so hard for having riflemen. So I think that would overall serve them better, and, not encourage blobbing, and, standing out in the bloody open. And thusly also creating more value for infantry, flanking tactics, and also, make them use their smoke more rather than just, running straight into MD-42s without getting suppressed, which is also pretty damn silly. So I think those changes were to implement, I think the Americans would overall, be forced to make more use of the faction, would be less of some no-brainer choices, and I also think we need to look into the doctrine, specifically recon support mechanized, need to buff the half-track, the M3, too weak, and the Greyhound, I think, needs a light damage boost versus vehicle itself. So it's more worth that way, but not versus infantry. I think that would also happen. That would also make this doctrine stand out more. In fact, I'd further suggest mechanized then gets rid of the assault units that replace them with cavalry riflemen, somewhat like, the ones in the campaign. No one's for storm rifles, just a bunch of submachine guns, not quite as durable as Rangers, but still, able of doing some damage, but again, not quite so durable. That might also, make that one a bit more useful. Replace recon run there with combined arms. And again, I think mechanized would see a lot more usage, at least for some. Again, combined arms is one of those abilities which is really, really good, but most players don't bother with, which I suppose what you call then a skill ability. Haha. Anyways, if that were to be implemented overall, I think the Americans will be a more interesting, fun to play with and fun to play against faction, and also a lot less dominant, which again is a bit the issue there with the Riflemen. I would also finally possibly suggest making the Riflemen a bit easier to hit, a bit like how the conscripts are, which can still do a lot of damage. You just mentioned in an early game they aren't quite so dominant either, because there's a bit of a problem with the Wehrmacht at the moment. I'll just get to that in a bit, and that one also up there. As for, well, then the British we don't see so much. I mean, they still see some usage, but again, it's rather right. Americans and the Soviets is just dominant. They're just straightforward, more better than the British. Though the British aren't exactly poor, and in fact, I'd suggest that their virtue 2 bonus, which again means they got light cover bonus all times, gets replaced with making them cheaper to reinforce at veterancy 3. That way, also more encouragement factors taken to cover, and also maybe using commanders a bit more if they really want to get a whole shooty bang bang on the mode rather than just standing out in the bloody open themselves, which again is not good and should not be encouraged. So there is that. But otherwise, I think the British, again, also the AC needs to be looked into. It's a bit too good versus infantry and armor, which again, combined with other British abilities, does make the AC again a bit too good in some sense. And obviously, the emplacement needs to be looked into as well. There's still sort of a powerful factor, in particular on some maps. And again, I'd probably just recommend sort of nerfing Brace, really. Otherwise, they just need to learn to use their abilities. They get so many good doctrinal abilities. Most of them will just use, mobile assault for flamethrowers and the infiltration commandos. And honestly, for infiltrators, I'd probably just suggest all infiltrator infantry that's starting out with assault weapons lose it and then be made to have it as an upgrade with some additional ability, a bit similar to how the Stormtroopers work. That way, making it a bit better. In the case of the Partisans, I'd probably suggest making them into some of the skirmish infantry with a marksman upgrade and the ability to lay down booby traps, dropping the assault concept entirely. But that's another discussion. Anyways, there for the British, not so much. I mean, doctrinally, it's a lot of, again, mobile assault. At least for 1v1s, advanced emplacements rather fallen off. They're not so cool. Some use Vanguard, but mostly it's just mobile assault, really. Some tactical support, special weapons with, anti-tank rifles, maybe the half-tracks. But overall, not a lot of ability usage. Well, if they were to use it more, I think they'd also get a lot more out of the British, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot much there I think they are missing out on. Otherwise, Cromwell's a lot of Cromwells, because the Cromwell is really, really good for its pricing, and you can get out pretty fast, in particular, again, with an AC to sort of keep the Germans at bay. So again, some things that I think that needs to be looked into, plus the Universal Carrier probably could do with a small nerf. I think it got a bit too good. Otherwise, not so much to say there about the British, but again, they don't see so much usage. So I haven't really seen them that much the last month compared to this. And then for the Soviets, in terms of the Allies, again, a lot more usage. In fact, the last month, they were the most played faction in 1v1 there, these sort of higher tiers, which should indicate also to an extent where sort of a lot of the faith is. I mean, Guardsmen, really, really good. In fact, veteran fleet Guardsmen like machine guns can pretty much hold Obersoldaten until they get really veteran, which should say something about how powerful the Guardsmen are. Plus, they can get out faster than the Obersoldaten. Country, of course, a lot of usage. Snipers, Maxims, still a lot of Maxims. So many Maxims. Maxims need to be nerfed. Either they overall sort of overhaul the Maxim, or at the very least, they make it easier to hit. And I'd almost say apply the same penalties there to the mortar and to the field gun, because again, they also have huge cruisers. And means if you try to flank them, unless you get really lucky, they'll just get away because they're just so tough to kill. So, apply received accuracy modifier there, then makes it a bit easier to hit and kill if you actually flank them. I think that would be a good start there for that. Otherwise, in terms of meta game, it's mostly Guard motors, some shock rifle, a few other sort of Guards doctrine, but it's really just heavily focused around Guards motor because, well, the Guardsmen are just so good. In fact, it might be time to slightly consider nerfing them a bit. Really, they can just take on most stuff, even medium tanks, and you have to worry about their PTRSs, which I think might be code speak there for maybe we should slightly lower the penetration of the PTRSs. They're not supposed to be taking on, heavier armor like that. That's rather pushing it to that, or the DP light machine guns need to be nerfed, which could also be an idea just a bit. Lower the munitions cost, but still nerf the DP light machine gun. That would also sort of be a consideration there, in that direction to overall consider sort of for them. Otherwise, T-34-76 have certainly seen a surge as the machine guns got buffed. T-30-45s, HD-5s are a rule. Mechanized armor companies use a lot more usage. T-70 still see a lot of usage because it's still damn good. But we are seeing more players just play straight for Tier 4, so that's something. Lend-Lease still see some use with some players, and overall at this point, just suggest make the M4C required tech like the T-30-45, add it to the mechanized armor compania. That I think would overall make that one a lot more balanced. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, in terms of sort of mainline armor, the only issue I'd really seen against the T-70, again, I probably recommend a bit like the Stewart. It's sort of, loses a bit of infantry versus damage versus infantry. There's a damage modifier, so it isn't quite so murdersome because it's really good, and two T-70s can really just cause huge havoc, and the problem is sort of stopping. It's easier than the Stewart, but at the same time, it does feel a bit overwrought when they also have the A half tech, and that pretty much means there's no real reason to go for the A half tech. I would compensate though then with increasing its penetration so that it's a better opportunity to active flank tanks, where currently it doesn't really have much more. So that way, the T-70 wouldn't be quite as overwhelmingly powerful in the early stages, but it would actually have more impact later on by having better penetration, thus allowing it to flank better. That way, doing more damage in that direction. I think that would serve the T-70 better, and again, would also mean less horrible punishment for Axis, which again, the T-70 is really, really, really good at doing. So I think that would be the optimal path there. And would also then make the A half tech a bit more sort of attractive for dealing with infantry specifically, which again can do a lot of damage, but just doesn't see much usage. Because again, why would you when you got the T-70? Again, that sense there's just also way too much overlap there in terms of early game between the two. So again, giving the T-70 sort of bit more room there, I think would sort of, give more, density, more sort of mid space between the A half tech and the S-6, I suppose you could call it. So again, I think that would be sort of the right direction there to take the Soviet Su-76 in, or T-70 into. Beyond that, not so much else there really. As such, again, maybe nerf the Guardsman a bit there, and possibly consider giving the IS-2 a bit more of its own identity. I mean, it's just basically a bigger Tiger with a bigger gun. I mean, it doesn't really stand out much on his own. Maybe, revert it to the older, slow rate of fire, but more damage per shot, and your real bigger AoE. So more boom, and then maybe some kind of, armor-piercing round ability for sort of increased damage versus tanks as well, sort of bit like the Pershing. Just a thought there anyways. Moving on to the Axis Oberkommando West, they haven't seen so much, so it seems to have been a surge here lately. There's been a lot of Wehrmacht. Oberkommando West, though, has been mostly centered around Scavenge and Elite Armored for the most part. Luftwaffe come more or less fallen off the radar. I don't really see Fallschirmjägers anymore, which I think says a lot there on some levels. Again, I mean, overall, most of the doctrine at the moment is just not that good, and most Oberkommanders players just don't bother with elite infantry because they're so expensive, but so easily wiped, which, causes a bit of a problem there for them. So that, I think, is something that needs to be looked into, both with Obersoldaten but also Fallschirmjägers. But again, it's mostly elite armored, which isn't a good doctrine, but people go for it for the Sturmtiger. A bit of spec ops there for the Command Panther, maybe some Obersoldaten, mostly it's just for the Command Panther. And of course, scavenge for grenades, Ostwinds, and, well, Jaegers. So I'm also seeing a small surge in Firesturm, though not a lot. It seems to have sort of briefly there and then just sort of fallen back, though it was pretty interesting to watch and how I think some use there. There's slightly more Sturm Pioneer play, but otherwise it's just mostly Volksgrenadiers, maybe into Panthers, Panzer IVs, slightly Jagdpanzers. Mechanized rating is popular, and if they go for the battle group headquarters, never the flak half track most cases because it's bad. It needs to be buffed. It's just terrible. Increase the role is performance there versus enemy infantry. Otherwise, make it a lot cheaper because at its current price level, it's just not good enough. I would say move down to a 35 fuel or buff its gun considerably. Similarly, buff the flat emplacement. It's just terrible. Absolute terrible. It needs to be fixed. Add 4 gun members instead and just 2. So it does just, get easily super wiped and, improve the performance of the gun because it's absolutely disgraceful. For Fallschirmjägers, hard to say they're what they sort of really need as such. Maybe a 5th member overall would serve them better. Lower the damage overall of the FT-42s, but then sort of spread out there of them. But overall that way, give them a bit more survivability, I suppose. I mean, for a 4-man squad, they are so easily wiped out, which isn't really fun. And again, they are 444 manpower. For the Obersoldaten, I'd suggest just, lowering the manpower cost to 340, because again, you have to take up so far in terms of Oberkommando West. And then you have to go for them, and they are so easily wiped. I mean, one mortar run, for example, from the Americans can easily, end up wiping a full Obersoldaten squad. So, making them a bit cheaper and thus easier to lose might help a bit there. Otherwise, of course, also a lot of King Tigers from the Oberkommando West. And overall, I also just suggest for the Oberkommando West to look into some of their veterancy. I mean, there's a lot, I think, too high veterancy requirements for King Tiger, Sturmtigs, and the Kubelwagen. Kubelwagen has way too high there for its considering its ability there. So that really needs to be lowered, to be honest. But a lot of the vehicles there, I think, need to be looked into and how much experience they require. And I'd also look into replacing the Combat Blitz with something more useful, something actually more offensively minded for them. What, though, it's hard to say. I mean, they could replace it with the heat rounds ability. I mean, that, I suppose, would add a bit more overall punch that way than replacing the elite armor doctrine, which overall needs to be overhauled with, something that fits a bit better. Maybe a mass blitzkrieg ability would serve that better, but, heat rounds for the automatic, maybe. Otherwise, not so much else there, I think. At the moment, at least what I can think of. But again, I mean, they haven't really seen a lot of play there, but seems to be resurging a bit there, so there's some resurgent interest. And then finally you get to the Wehrmacht, who's sort of seen a lot of play, but overall has a lot of struggles there, and overall are incredibly more and more in need of an overhaul. In fact, I've seen a lot more Wehrmacht players, for example, just skip Tier 1 entirely. In fact, I'm one of them, switching over to Pioneers and MG42s, simply because Tier 1 just, doesn't give you enough. The Grenadiers just lack the performance, for the Panzerfaust, which I actually think I bugged so many times we ordered a Panzerfaust and it doesn't go off. But you're just not getting enough, then you're better off going for Tier 2 then quickly with 222s, Panzer Grenadier half tracks, that way to push back against the enemy, because with the current state of Tier 1, you're just putting yourself so far behind versus light vehicles and infantry that easily outperforms your Grenadiers and so on that it's just not worth it. So if, say, 3 Pioneers, 2 MG42s, go for Tier 2 quickly, and you're usually better off. You're in fact forced to play very aggressively as the Wehrmacht, because defensive play, in particular with the American mortar, it doesn't pay off because your infantry can't keep up with them. Overall veterancy abilities and all, just the Wehrmacht needs an overhaul. They need to rethink how the Wehrmacht's supposed to work, because problem is everything the Wehrmacht can do for the most part, except the Stug, everybody else can really do better. And in particular, the British you can better describe as, a better Wehrmacht. Overall, so, I mean, they really need to be looked into. When we're seeing more Tier 4 play, Sturmpanzer's only seeing some effectiveness. Some players do like go for the Panther, but I'd still not describe the Panther as a good choice for the Wehrmacht. It still needs to be buffed. I'd still recommend, say some AoE to it, or buff its damage overall with its main gun. Otherwise, it's just not worth it. And I probably suggest, some kind of Tier 4 infantry unit for the Wehrmacht there, so what they had, it's just to give more incentive to actually make use of it, because again, 4-man squads, even the more elite ones, are going to get wiped hard. Also, stormtroopers, less expensive assault rifle upgrade, 75 munitions, I think would be quite well serving there. Also, the Pioneers need to be buffed. Half track needs to be sorted out. Going to make videos of that, but overall, give it some suppression. I think, better veteran abilities, maybe, support infantry around it. And for the armor, replace Blitzkrieg with something with more utility as well. Again, maybe some kind of combined arms ability that boosts, gets boosted with infantry by fighting it. I mean, that would fit in with the whole German idea. Otherwise, not quite an immediate ideas, but again, replace it with something more functional than Blitzkrieg, which just is, cheap stuff. Then also suggest replacing, Panzer Tactician with, say, maybe some kind of grenade throw ability, and then of course remove Blitzkrieg, make it into a Mars Blitzkrieg ability, something like Breakthrough, but with actual offensive bonuses. And get overall something, that works and gives incentive then to attack and get in aggressively, rather than the current one, which only gives you incentive to get the hell out of there. But really, just the main idea here is, buff Wehrmacht, because again, when skipping Tier 1 is more viable for the Wehrmacht than using Tier 1, that should usually, be a bit of an alarm bell there going off that something is clearly not right. And there's a lot not right, I think, there with the Wehrmacht at the moment. I mean, it's not completely impossible to play, but when you're better off skipping Tier 1, I would argue there's a problem when you, forgo Grenadiers and Mortars, for example, from your play. I mean, again, they're supposed to be combined arms, but you're better off ignoring it, for example. So that, again, is a bit worrisome, to say the least. So really, the Wehrmacht has a lot of work ahead of it, and hopefully Relic, once the tournament's over, will really get to work on fixing. Maybe we'll do so while that's going on, and then of course come up with some good solutions. then will overall make the Wehrmacht a lot more satisfying to play as. So, yeah, I mean, doctrinally we're looking at a lot of elite troops, mechanized assault for crutch play, mobile defense, lightning war, the usual suspects for the most part. The usual suspects, nothing huge there. Bunch of Panzer Gunners, again, tier 3, tier 4 play sort of with some regularity. It really depends on the taste of the player. Stugs and Panzer 4, Stuggies if they're crouching, and of course Tigers, of course, still quite common if they overall feel they're on the back foot. So there you go, this was the state of the balance for August. Overall, again, very much in favour of Allies. Axes overall, I mean, they're playable, and they got some strength, but overall, in terms of diversity strategically, they are rather limited at the moment. There's a lot there that needs work, to be honest. So hopefully this has been enlightening. Hopefully this gave you some ideas on what to expect and what to prepare for. Hopefully in the coming month. And if you did, subscribe, like, share, and of course talk about it everywhere you can. This is Imperial signing off, and see you for another State of the Balance next month. Cheers.